3 stages of modification. That's all you need. 3 stages of modification that will incrementally increase the horsepower and torque on your 10th generation Honda Accord. I've gone through testing, 4+ years of testing. I've done a ton of research. I have tested out modifications, taken it to the dyno to see how much horsepower and torque it gains. I have taken it to the track, testing the quarter mile to see if that power translates into quicker acceleration times, both on the quarter mile and 0 to 60 times. And I am about to reveal to you the 3 stages of modification that will add the most horsepower, the most bang for the buck. I will identify how much it costs new. I will identify how much you can get it for used. I'll show you the horsepower and torque you could expect to gain with those modifications. And I'll let you know how easy or how difficult it is to install those modifications. So what this is the KTuner or Hondata. It is a tuning device that you simply hook up to your OBD port and it adjusts the tune on your car. Mainly what it does is increase the boost a little bit. It'll adjust the air-fuel ratios by adjusting the amount of fuel being delivered, adjust your timing tables, etc. You can get that an off-the-shelf tune with the KTuner. And I do recommend the KTuner version 2 with the display. That is $650 new. With the KTuner, you automatically get Stage 2 tune for the Honda Accord. So a significant gain in horsepower and torque. Let's take a look at the graph where we have 4 consistent pulls. Great results. Also have one dyno graph here that shows what I think is the peak gain in torque and the peak gain in horsepower. What I recommend, if you want to take it just a little step further, is Phearable offers its own off-the-shelf tune that does provide more horsepower and more torque than the KTuner Stage 2. We're looking at between 294, 296 wheel horsepower. The Phearable Stage 3 produces more peak horsepower than the KTuner Stage 2. However, the KTuner Stage 2 produces a higher peak torque number. The difference is at roughly 3,300 RPMs. At that point, the Phearable Stage 2 clearly, in all RPM points, has higher horsepower and higher torque readings. This is a very nice looking tune, especially when you compare it to our totally stock graph. If you're purchasing the KTuner V2 at the same time, you can get $100 off. So a total of $750, easy to revert back to stock, no noticeable from the outside changes made to your car. And you could stop right there. That's a significant improvement. You are going to notice the additional horsepower and torque. You will feel it on the street. You will feel it down low. The boost in amount of torque down low in the RPMs is significant. So it is not something that you have to wind out the car. You have to really rev the RPMs to notice. You'll notice it every day, and it is highly recommended. I want to take this opportunity to mention our merch store located on Etsy. I'll leave a link in the description below. Go take a look. We have t-shirts related to our 2 project cars, the 10th generation Honda Accord and the Toyota Supra. If you like something there, please consider purchasing. Consider supporting the channel by purchasing some merch. Stage 2 involves flex fuel. Flex fuel, ethanol, and ethanol blend, sold at gas stations as E85. What you're trying to do is you will change the tune using KTuner to compensate for the fact that you are running an ethanol blend. And usually that ethanol blend is anywhere between 30 to 35% ethanol. Now, before you can pump ethanol into your car and take advantage of the ethanol, you need to make sure that you're monitoring what that ethanol level is. So you need an ethanol analyzer and have that analyzer be able to interact with your ECU to tell it that it has ethanol in the gas tank. PRL sells a flex fuel kit. It's $550 new. You can buy them used for 450 bucks. With that, not only do you gain additional peak horsepower and peak torque, but you gain it across the board. So across the entire RPMs, down low, all the way to red line, you see significant increases in horsepower and torque. KTuner automatically has a tune built in to the device. When you purchase it, you already have it in there. But once you install the PRL Flex Fuel Kit, you'll need to go into the device and check some boxes off to identify the fact that you have the ability now to run ethanol. However, I do recommend Phearable Stage 4 ECU Tune. It definitely changes the horsepower and torque curves. I like it better than the KTuner's ethanol, and it does add a little bit more horsepower and torque. This is the graph comparing the Phearable Stage 4 to the KTuner's ethanol tune. And in this one, you can see, obviously, we're getting more horsepower and more torque, but there's a cutover point right around, what is that, 3,200 RPMs, where actually the Phearable's making a little less early on in the RPMs. And again, for me, I think that's fine. I would much prefer that so that the car can get up to speed, can get going, and then take advantage of that added horsepower and torque later on in the RPM range when hopefully it has traction. This graph shows the difference between the Phearable Stage 3 and the Phearable Stage 4. You can clearly see the difference, what 36% ethanol mixture will do for your 10th generation Honda Accord. If you like this video, if you found it helpful, if you found it entertaining, if you want to help support the Lemon Factor, please consider hitting that super thanks button that can be found at the bottom of the video. Stage 3 includes upgrading to a larger turbo. So while that Honda Accord OEM turbo is a small turbo and it gives you quick responsiveness and a lot of torque down low, upgrading to a larger turbo will increase your horsepower and torque, but the power delivery will be very different. At the expense of low-end power, think less than 3,000 RPMs, you'll gain more horsepower and more torque higher up in the RPMs. With an upgraded turbo though, you do have other modifications you need to make. It's not a matter of simply installing a bigger turbo. You need to upgrade your air inlet, your downpipe. You definitely should get an upgraded, more efficient, larger intercooler. And with all of that complexity comes at a cost. You could upgrade to a larger turbo for about $4,000. Definitely can get it cheaper if you buy some of the stuff used, but that's a sizable price increase compared to Stage 1 and compared to Stage 2. What you gain from it is an additional 150 to 200 wheel horsepower on top of a stock 10th generation Honda Accord. Under 3,000 RPM, the OEM turbo puts out more horsepower and more torque. So if you're using this car for spirited driving, quarter mile, any type of track performance oriented, that's not a big deal, right? Because you're keeping it up higher in the RPMs. But if you're just driving around casually on the streets, if you're on the highway and you give it some gas, you're gonna have to wait. You will have to wait until about 3,000 RPMs before you feel that spool up, that power delivery. You can see anything in this case under 3,500 RPM, you actually have more benefit with keeping the stock turbo on. So even if you have a little bit more spirited driving, but you're never really taking it to redline, you might be better off just keeping the stock turbo and putting on the Phearable Stage 3 tune. For those of you with a manual transmission, you'll be able to wind the transmission up a lot higher. And at least with this graph, it does indicate that the horsepower continues to increase. So you may gain a little bit more than what we have here because of your ability to take it past the 5,800 RPMs. In this case, you'll get the benefit of the 271 Kuro at roughly about 3,800 RPMs and above. You'll have that additional horsepower and torque. As you can see across the RPM, we have gains, and with more gains higher in the RPM. This is great. We got a peak gain of roughly 40 wheel horsepower. That is phenomenal. Look at that gain. Everything above, let's call it 3,500 RPMs, and it just keeps going and going. We now have a 500 horsepower car. If you do the math, even if you do it conservatively, 12, 15% parasitic loss through the drivetrain to the wheels, we're pushing out 440 wheel horsepower, which I can argue is 500 crank horsepower. And that is tremendous. That is huge. That really changes the characteristics of the 10th generation Honda Accord. Whether or not it's for you, though, is something that you need to consider. Personally, I think Stage 1 and Stage 2, for the dollar, what you get is huge increases, noticeable increases on the street, and still a drivable car. You probably need to upgrade the tires to put all that power to the ground, but a fun car nonetheless. With that said, I think we're done for today. I want to thank you very much for joining, and until next time.